Since Tony mentioned language and how her mother grew up speaking Spanish and you grew up speaking English, I want to talk about language for a minute or two. I had the pleasure of interviewing Santi Frazier for an issue of Kweli last year. And Santi Frazier, as I mentioned earlier, is the Lannan Foundation Indigenous Writer Fellow. He was raised for the first 5 years of his life by his grandfather, who spoke Cherokee, to him as a baby. Santi states that it was my first language, and I feel the first words we hear in the beginnings of our human existence shape our lifelong relationship with language. In some ways, even though I have forgotten how to speak Cherokee fluently, I feel as if I think in that language. I feel as if my poems possess the sound and rhythmic qualities I heard as a child. So my question to the panel is, what was your first language? We already have the answer from Tony on that one. But how do the sounds and rhythms of Africa or the Caribbean or Mexico or Haiti work to close the distance in your work? We'll start with Nicole.
My first language, language that I was exposed to was Spanish. And I was very fortunate in that when I grew up, language was music, and I was surrounded by that music every day. Actually, quite literally, my mother, my grandfather, my aunts, they were musicians. They are. You know, they play the guitar and they sing. And my grandfather and grandmother are both mean storytellers, although they're not aware that they're great storytellers, but you know, but they are. And you know, I remember at night, Maxine Hong Kingston, actually, she has, there's something that she explores in her memoir called Talk Story. And I remember at night that that's what my grandfather would do, talk story. And through story, he would share our family history, myth, legend, folklore, you know, that sort of thing. And when I was a child, I don't think I really appreciated that gift. You know, growing up, I mean, we're talking about, you know, closing the distance. Like, I wanted to widen the gap because I was, you know, so concerned about fitting in, you know, and I was, it's Puerto Rican, going to a predominantly, you know, Irish, Italian, Catholic school, and, you know, being called all sorts of names. And then, you know, going back to Puerto Rico and, you know, not being light enough. So there was this constant, you know, there was conflicting feelings and trying to like straddle both cultures. So in terms of language, when I write, and if you notice, I use a lot of Spanish in my work, and the Spanish is just, it's embedded into the text. And what I use, you know, I use language in Closing the Distance to kind of speak to my Puerto Rican experience and what that was like, and my American experience. So that's how I use language.
Thank you. Naomi, I know that your father is a musician. Was he, during the storytelling sessions with you, one to use patois often in the stories and poems, or maybe even in the music that he shared with you?
So I am half Haitian, half African American, and that's a really funny question. I mean, at home, my father did not speak Creole, and the language that I heard was his version of English. And his music, because my father's a jazz musician. So you know, what happened in my household was not very unique to me in a lot of ways, and not in the sense that my father didn't speak Creole to me, in the sense that, you know, he told a lot of stories. I think often, you know, immigrant parents will do that with their children to kind of transfer the culture. So that was one way that you know, that language was important to me. But, you know, the fact that he didn't speak Creole to me, I got a very interesting version of English that I thought, you know, was correct. Even now, to this day, I learned, oh, that's not really how you phrase that in English, which was really interesting. But language for me has been something that's been kind of strange, because, I mean, I can understand Creole, and I learned French in school, and I grew up in a, you know, predominantly white neighborhood. And I even remember several years ago being on a phone interview, and the interviewer wanting to know my race, and she couldn't tell because of my voice and my name, you know? So language has been kind of complex for me. So the way I see it is, on the one hand, I think the sound of my father's voice and kind of the rhythm and his, where he put accents is very much in, you know, my writing. And on the other hand, I think that, you know, race can kind of take a back seat because of the complexity of my background, even though, you know, I write about race. Almost everything I write is about race. So that's kind of a tangent on what you asked.
And a follow-up question. The piece that you're currently working on about your father now, can you speak about the importance of music in language as you write and you work your way through the final piece? I know it's still a work of art, still a work in progress.
So music?
Yes, music in your life and art.
Right. Well, I think I try to capture music, the pulse of it, the rhythm of it. So, like, when I'm thinking about form, I don't tend to use a lot of musical language per se, but my father has a very staccato, kind of quick way of speaking. He has a lot of energy, and he's a little bit jumpy, so I try to kind of capture that in the structure. So form becomes really important for me when I'm thinking about transferring sound to, you know, writing.